The day my mother called me the selfish one, I was sitting in my car in the parking lot of a bank. I had just walked out with a small slip of paper, a confirmation number, a date stamp, 3 bureau codes printed in a column like a grocery receipt. I folded it once and slid it behind my driver's license. I drove home in the quiet. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't need to. That was a Tuesday in October. Everything else unraveled on a Friday in January. I grew up knowing the rules, even though no one ever said them out loud. My brother, 2 years older, twice as reckless, operated under a different set. The rules for him were suggestions. The rules for me were load-bearing walls. When I was 15, I spent an entire summer babysitting the neighbor's kids 3 afternoons a week to save up for a camera I wanted for a photography class. I saved $280. My brother borrowed it for what he described as a sure thing, some resale scheme involving sneakers that were supposedly going to triple in value. He lost it all within a month. My mother told me I should have gotten it in writing. My father said it would build character. My brother said he was sorry and then asked if I had any more. When I was 22, I graduated with a degree in accounting, magna cum laude, from a state school I had paid for largely on my own through scholarships and a part-time job at a campus bookstore. My brother, that same summer, dropped out of his second college in his 3rd year. My parents threw him a dinner party to celebrate his new direction, they said. I got a card with a $20 bill inside it for graduation. My mother signed it with a little smiley face next to her name. I am not telling you this to make you feel sorry for me. I am telling you this so you understand exactly who I was by the time I turned 29. Not naive, not bitter, but clear-eyed about the architecture of my family, the way weight got distributed, the way certain names got whispered with worry and certain names got whispered with pride even when the situation didn't warrant it. My role was fixed. I was the one who handled things. I was the one who kept herself together, so that when things fell apart for everyone else, there was somewhere soft to land. I was the safety net. No one thanked the safety net. Everyone expected it to be there. I had a good job, senior accountant at a mid-sized firm. The kind of job where you arrive on time and leave late and build something slow and unglamorous and real. I had a 401k I contributed to automatically every month without touching. I had a savings account that I treated like a second job. And I had a credit score, 791, built over 7 years of paying everything on time, carrying no balance I couldn't cover, disputing one error in year 3, and winning. That number was not luck. It was 7 years of discipline that nobody in my family had ever once commented on. Because financial stability is invisible until someone decides it belongs to them. My brother had none of this. He had a food truck that lasted 8 months before the engine failed and the debt didn't. He had a social media consulting business that had a logo and a website and 0 clients. He had a cryptocurrency phase I am still, genuinely, not able to think about without closing my eyes. He had a different roommate every year, always people who seemed to vanish before their name appeared on anything official. He had our parents, reliably, in his corner, and he had charm, the easy warm kind that makes people want to help you even when they can see the pattern. Then he met someone. They got serious fast. And suddenly, my brother decided he wanted to buy a house. My mother called on a Sunday afternoon in mid-September. I was in my kitchen, meal prepping for the week, the cutting board, the smell of garlic and olive oil. A podcast playing low in the background. She asked if she could stop by, and I said sure without thinking about it, because she almost never asked. She usually just showed up. She came with my father. That should have told me something. My father treated the drive to my apartment the way other people treat a root canal, necessary, unpleasant, to be minimized. He sat at my kitchen table and looked at the window the entire time. My mother folded her hands the way she does when she has already decided something and is now in the process of informing you. Your brother found a place, she said. A house, 3 bedrooms, good neighborhood, a yard. I said that was nice. And I meant it, mostly. His credit isn't quite where it needs to be. I kept chopping. The lender said that if he had a co-borrower, someone with strong credit and stable income, the application would go through without any problem. He'd refinance in 2 years and your name would come right off. It would just be temporary, just to get him started. I set down the knife. I want to tell you that I said no immediately, clearly, without hesitation. I want to tell you I had no moment of weakness. The truth is that I stood there for a long beat and felt the old pull, the pull of being the one who could fix it, the one who got to be useful for something other than being ignored, the one who might, just this once, make them look at me the way they always looked at him, wanted, necessary, worth something. I asked how much the house was. $340,000. I asked about his income, his current debt load, his payment history. My mother looked at my father. My father looked at the window. That's why he needs you, my mother said. You understand all of that. What she meant was, I understood all of that, and would do it anyway. I said I needed a few days to think it through. I said I'd look at the numbers. I'd call by end of week. My mother smiled. She said she knew I'd come through. She said my brother was so ready to turn things around. She said it would mean so much to the whole family. My father, as far as I could tell, looked at the window the entire drive home. I did not sleep well that night. By Monday morning, I had made 2 lists. The first was every financial disaster my brother had created or contributed to in the previous 6 years. The food truck debt. The loans from my parents that were never repaid. The one time my mother had called me and asked, very quietly, if I had a little extra she could transfer to him just until things settled down. That particular transfer was never mentioned again. I added everything up. The total was significant. The second list was what co-signing a mortgage would mean for me specifically. What happened to my debt-to-income ratio? What happened to my ability to buy my own place someday? What happened to my credit profile if payments were missed? What happened if there was a foreclosure? I am an accountant. I did not flinch from the numbers. Then I called a friend from college who practiced real estate law. I told her the situation without using names. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said, very calmly, do not do this. And if you've already signed anything, call me back immediately. I hadn't signed anything yet, but what she said next was what stayed with me. She said, the problem with co-signing for someone who can't qualify on their own is not the best case scenario. The problem is what the worst case actually looks like. And in my experience, when a family member can't qualify on their own, the worst case is usually what happens. I thanked her. I sat with that for a while. Then I thought about the way my mother had worded it. I knew you'd come through. Not, we were hoping you might consider. Not, we want to talk through whether this makes sense for you. I knew you'd come through past tense confidence in a future action, as if my yes were something she had already retrieved from a storage space she had access to without asking. I picked up my phone. I called Equifax first, then Experian, then TransUnion. I placed a security freeze on my credit file with all 3 bureaus. A security freeze means no new line of credit can be opened in your name. No mortgage inquiry goes through. No loan application gets processed. It takes about 15 minutes. It's completely free. It's completely legal, and it can be placed and lifted at will. I had done it once years earlier, after a data breach notification from a retailer. I knew exactly how the process worked. 3 confirmation numbers. 1 folded slip of paper behind my license. Then I called my mother back and told her I was still thinking it over but leaning toward yes. I know how that sounds. Let me explain. I had said no to things in this family before. I knew the anatomy of that. First came the guilt, your brother really needs this. Don't you care about what he's been through? Then came the pressure, your father and I have sacrificed so much. We are asking for one thing. Then came the reframing. What if we structured it differently? What if it were just a smaller loan? What if you just thought about it a little longer? Then came the silence, the cold withdrawal of warmth, the absence that was meant to feel like punishment, that sometimes worked because some part of me was still 15 and wanted to be included. That cycle could take weeks. At the end of it, I would either give in, or I would be the villain in a story my mother would set down on the table at every family dinner for years, polished and reshaped into something that made me sound cold and her sound reasonable. I had learned something, over almost 30 years, about the difference between saying no and making no the only available outcome. The mortgage application required a co-borrower. The co-borrower had to have a credit profile that could be pulled and verified. If the pull came back, flagged, if the system showed a freeze and couldn't access the file, the application couldn't be processed. Not denied. Exactly. Just stopped. By a number on a screen, not by a person. There was no one to argue with. No villain, no betrayal, no midnight phone call about priorities. Just a flag. Just a system. Just the way things go sometimes. I was going to let the system say no. The weeks between that Monday and the closing date were not easy. My mother called 4 times. Each call was warmer and more specific than the last. The house had a finished basement, a 2-car garage, a school district that got good ratings online, as if I were the one considering moving in. She mentioned that the sellers were motivated and the timing was perfect, and wasn't it wonderful that things were finally coming together for him. My brother called me once, which was notable because my brother called me approximately never under normal circumstances. He was friendly in the particular way he became friendly when he needed something open, a little vulnerable, performing just enough honesty to be disarming. He said he knew we hadn't always been close. He said he was trying to do things differently. He said this house felt like a real step, like the beginning of something stable, and that having me in his corner meant more than I knew. I was sitting in my parked car in a garage downtown when he said that. I stared at the concrete wall in front of me for a long time. I said I was glad things felt different. I said I was rooting for him. My father sent a text my father almost never texted that said, "Your brother means well. He just needs someone to believe in him." I read it twice. I thought about the $280, the camera I never got, the character it supposedly built. I thought about 7 years of credit building that my father had never once mentioned, because quiet competence doesn't need a dinner party. I didn't respond. The week before the scheduled closing, my mother called to say she had set up an appointment with a loan officer at a branch near her house, Thursday at 2. She said it was basically a formality. She said the loan officer had been very helpful and everything was in order, just needed signatures and they'd be on their way. I said I would be there. I set a calendar reminder. Then I set a second one for Thursday morning, just a note to myself, 8 words. You already handled it. You don't owe anyone. Thursday was gray and cold. I wore my black wool coat. I got to the branch 13 minutes early and sat in my car and finished the last few minutes of a podcast I'd been listening to all week. Something about decision-making under constraint. About how people behave when they believe they have no options left. I found it interesting. I turned it off and went inside. My mother was already seated near the front. My brother sat beside her. His partner, they'd been together about 2 years. She was quiet and seemed tired, sat on his other side looking at her phone. My father hadn't come. I filed that away. My brother stood when he saw me. The wide smile, the shoulder squeeze, the warmth performed for an audience of one. I nodded. I sat down. The loan officer was young, mid-30s, navy tie, the practiced calm of someone used to delivering news both good and bad, without changing his expression. He led us to a small room. He opened a folder. He typed. He looked at the screen. He typed something else. Something shifted behind his eyes. He excused himself. My mother leaned toward me and said quietly, I think this is going well. I looked at my hands. He came back and sat. He said he was running into a flag on the co-borrower's file, my file, indicating a security freeze was active with all 3 credit bureaus. He said this prevented him from pulling a full credit report, which meant the application as currently structured could not be processed today. He said it was very common after identity theft or a data breach. He asked, professionally and without accusation, whether I had recently placed a freeze. I said I had. I said I'd placed it a few months ago after receiving a data breach notification from an online retailer. This was true. I had received such a notification. It was simply not the reason for this particular freeze. The loan officer said he understood completely, and that I could lift the freeze usually 24 to 72 hours and we could reschedule. He said the closing date might need to be extended. My mother looked at me. Not anger yet. Something before anger, the look of someone who has just picked up a familiar object and found it heavier than expected. My brother looked at his partner. She looked at the ceiling. I said I was sorry for the inconvenience. I said I'd look into it right away. I said it the way you say something when you have no intention of following through. The closing date came and went. The sellers declined to extend escrow. Without my income and credit anchoring the application, my brother's profile alone returned terms that no rational person would accept, a rate nearly 2 points higher, a down payment requirement that would have wiped out whatever he'd saved. His debt-to-income ratio was too high. His credit score was 60 points below the threshold for the loan product they'd been targeting. The deal fell through. I heard about this not from my brother or my mother but from my aunt, at a Sunday dinner I almost hadn't attended. Mentioned in the same tone she'd use for weather, such a shame about the house. Timing's everything in this market. I made a sound of sympathy. I passed the bread basket. I helped clear the table and washed 2 dishes and told everyone I had an early morning. I drove home. I made tea. I sat on my couch in the quiet and thought, for a moment, that maybe it was simply over, that the door had closed, and everyone would quietly walk away from it, and the air would stay still. I have never been that lucky. The call came 9 days later, 11:50 at night. My mother. I was in bed. I answered because, regardless of everything, you answer. Some part of you, some very old, very tired part still picks up. I need to talk to you about what you did, she said. Her voice was controlled. That was somehow worse than if she'd been screaming. She said my brother had looked into it. He'd spoken to someone at the bank, gone through the records, looked up how credit freezes worked and when they could be placed. The freeze on my file had been placed according to the bank's records approximately 5 days after my parents had come to visit me. The data breach notification I'd mentioned, when she looked into it, had occurred over a year earlier. She let all of this sit in the air between us. Why would you do that? She said. Not yelling, not breaking. Just that bewilderment, the specific bewilderment of someone looking at a map they have used for 30 years and finding that one of the roads has been quietly, permanently, rerouted. I was quiet for a moment. The streetlight came through my curtains and made a pale line across the ceiling. Because no one asked me, I said. She said she didn't understand what I meant. You came to my apartment, I said. And you told me you knew I'd come through. You didn't sit across from me and lay out the situation and ask me what I thought. You told me what was happening. You told me my brother needed this. You told me the family was counting on me. And then you left and acted like my answer was already somewhere in a drawer you had access to. She said I was being dramatic. She said it was just a signature. It's not just a signature. A mortgage is a legal obligation. If he stops paying and based on the last 6 years, that is not an unreasonable thing to anticipate. The bank does not call him first. They call the co-borrower with the strongest credit profile. That would be me. And at the end of it, after all the calls and the missed payments and the process, my credit would look like his does right now. And I built it. I built it entirely by myself, for 7 years, and no one in this family has ever once acknowledged that. She was quiet. He really wanted that house, she said. I said I knew that. It would have meant so much to him. I said I knew that too. You had the ability to help him and you made a choice not to. There it was. That sentence. In that exact shape. I had heard the shape of it so many times that it had worn grooves in me. I could feel exactly where it landed. I took one breath. Just one. I protected myself, I said. That's the choice I made. I protected the one thing I built on my own. Without any help. Without any party. Without a single person in this family ever saying they were proud of me for it. And the fact that you were calling me at midnight to tell me I should feel ashamed of that tells me everything I needed to know about how safe that thing actually was. She said my father was deeply disappointed in me. I said I was sure he was. She said she had expected better from me. I held the phone and looked at the ceiling and thought about all the years I had tried to be better. Whatever better meant in the context of this family. And how better had always seemed to mean more available. More willing to treat the word no as a temporary position. I didn't take anything from him, I said. I didn't lie to him. I didn't touch his money or his plans. I protected a number on a credit report that I earned, that I need, that belongs to me. When that number was gone, and it would have been gone, you would have looked at me exactly the way you're looking at me right now. And it would have been worse. Because then I would have had nothing. She made a sound that wasn't a word. The sound of someone who has run out of argument but is not prepared to concede. I hope you can live with the choice you made, she said. I thought about that for a moment. Genuinely. I'm not proud of how I handled it, I said. I should have said no to your face the day you came over. I should have been clearer sooner. That part I do regret. But protecting my financial future? Living with that is going to be very easy. She hung up. I lay there for a long time. The apartment was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator hum. A car passed outside. Then silence. Then another car. Then nothing. I thought about my brother. Somewhere across the city. In the apartment he was apparently now renting. And I tried to locate what I felt about him, and found it was complicated in a way I didn't have the energy to untangle at midnight. Not hatred. Not even anger, exactly. Something more like grief. The particular grief of loving someone who has always been willing to spend you. My brother called me 2 days later. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message that was 3 minutes long, and in those 3 minutes, he cycled through something that started as an attempt at reasoning, shifted into something adjacent to an apology, and then ended in a tone I recognized a slight hardening, a withdrawal of the warmth, a hint of the same disappointment my mother had expressed. As if I owed him not just the co-signature but the decency to feel bad about not providing it. I did not call back. My father sent a text the following week. Priorities say a lot about a person. I read it twice. I put my phone face down. He was not wrong, technically. My priorities did say something about me. I had decided, somewhere between that Sunday afternoon and that Tuesday at the bank, that I was a priority. Not the only one, but one that counted. It would be dishonest to say the months that followed were easy. My mother and I went 3 weeks without speaking. My brother and I went longer. Family dinners had a new texture, careful, surface level, full of the particular effort that goes into not mentioning the thing everyone is thinking about. I showed up anyway, because I am not the kind of person who disappears from things. But I showed up differently. I showed up as someone who knew the shape of the place she was standing in. Spring came. The light changed. I did something I had been putting off for years. I started looking at condos, real ones, with a real budget and a real pre-approval that had only my name on it. I met with a loan officer who pulled my credit, unfrozen, intact, exactly where I'd maintained it, and she told me I had a strong file. I said, thank you. I did not explain to her what it had cost to keep it that way. My mother and I began to talk again. Not immediately, and not easily, but eventually. We talked the way you talk when something permanent has shifted, and you are both doing the work of learning a new geography. She did not apologize exactly, but one afternoon, sitting at her kitchen table over coffee, she said she had thought about what I'd said. She said she hadn't fully considered what it looked like from where I was standing. I said I knew she hadn't. That was as close as we got. But it was something. It was the first honest thing said between us in a long time. And I decided to hold it carefully rather than push for more. My brother I haven't spoken to since before the bank. I don't know what that becomes over the next few years. I'm not writing him off. I'm not building a wall. I'm leaving a door at an angle, not open enough to walk through without noticing, not closed enough to require a key. Life is long. People change. I have seen stranger things. What I know is this. Somewhere in the next few months, I am going to sign papers on a place that is mine. 2 bedrooms. Good light. A kitchen where I can stand and chop garlic and listen to a podcast in the quiet. No one's name on the deed but mine. I built everything I have by myself. I protected it by myself. And when the moment came where I had to choose between my future and someone else's plan for my future, I chose mine. Not because I stopped loving my family, because I finally decided that loving them didn't require me to burn down the one thing I had built with my own hands. The slip of paper is still in my wallet, behind my license. I don't need it anymore, but I keep it there anyway.